This is another damn podcast about digital asset management. I'm Henrik de Gior. Today I'm speaking with Bryan Cohen. Bryan, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks. Thanks for having me on the podcast today. I appreciate the invite.
Bryan, how are you involved with digital asset management?
I am the digital platform lead for Pfizer. My main role is overseeing the digital platform that we use for review and approval of all of our pharmaceutical promotional materials. That's a global system that has about 5,000 users.
How does a leading research-based biopharmaceutical company use digital asset management?
We use it in a couple of different ways. Our key is because we're so highly regulated with what we can actually show to consumers and what we can actually show to our healthcare providers. Our main focus with digital asset management is the review and approval process for all of the materials that we create. So a lot of people don't realize the much like a magazine or a newspaper or even an online website, the amount of review that goes into every little piece that you see, whether it's in a doctor's office or commercial on TV or even a radio ad, it goes through a very intense review and approval process, not just from an editorial standpoint, but also from a medical, legal, and regulatory standpoint before it even gets submitted to the FDA. That is our main focus, and there are tons of different rules and regulations. The United States is the most highly regulated, but there's certain rules in Canada, Latin America, Africa, Middle East, and even in the European Union, there are about 15 or 20 different regulatory bodies that all have different rules and tweaks and things that they require. So our review and approval system is almost like one global system that manages 100 different newspapers with different languages, and we have that complexity as well. On top of that, what we're trying to really get our hands around with the rapid pace that we have with acquisitions, with companies that we're either merging with or smaller pharmaceutical companies that we recently purchased, we're trying to get our hands around not only their review and approval system, but also their asset management. The pure thing when you think of DAM, normally images, videos, sound files, all of that stuff. Of course, it's different everywhere. And it's something that we're even internally at Pfizer trying to get our hands around. With all of this electronic content that we've created, with this huge transition to going all digital from a cost perspective and an efficiency and even an efficacy perspective with our advertising, we're trying to really get our hands around and control all of that intellectual property. So we use it at its core for review and approval. But the larger picture is figuring out how to get our hands around these assets so we can drive more towards custom, maybe not necessarily custom, but omni-channel marketing and more targeted marketing flexibility with our assets.
Bryan, what are the biggest challenges and successes you've seen with digital asset management?
Well, the biggest challenge for us is trying to convince folks at Pfizer and even within all of pharmaceutical of the key to really have their hands on that intellectual property. A lot of pharma companies have outsourced the creation of that content. So we have all kinds of things that we've purchased at agencies and buried in their storage. And the only thing we might see are the two or three photos that we might use in a particular piece. So the challenge is really a perception challenge in that we don't make money off of this digital content that we create. It helps drive sales, but we're not Huffington Post, we're not AOL, we're not a lot of these companies that make content and then make money directly from that content, either through subscription or advertising on their websites. So convincing internal executives and convincing just people in general at Pfizer of the need to focus on access. I don't necessarily want to say control, but access and understanding of those digital assets is a huge challenge. They're more, as you would imagine, they're focused on producing medicines. They're focused on producing pharmaceuticals or consumer medicines and getting those things to market. They're focused on marketing as a whole and as a platform, but not necessarily worried about the nitty gritty of how we manage metadata within a digital asset management system. It's not as sexy to them and it's not a focus because they don't make money directly off of it. However, they're also starting to struggle with understanding where everything is. And in order to create all of these apps and websites and advertisements, they're increasingly frustrated, the marketing teams are, with understanding what they already have out there so they can get to market quicker. So that's our biggest challenge. Our biggest success, I would have to say, over the last few years, at least for us, is going to more of a global mindset with what we create and being able to share this content from region to region or country to country, and then fine tuning it. That obviously saves cost, but more than anything, it gives teams the ability to leverage things that have been created in other places and are effective in other places and customize that for a local market. So we can get to the market quicker. If, say, a drug is approved in another country, which happens all the time, it might be approved in the United States, and then a month or two later, it's approved in Brazil. We need to be able to deploy materials quickly, and we can't recreate all those materials all the time. So our global platform is a huge success and a big step forward in being able to accomplish that.
And what advice would you like to share with DAM professionals and people aspiring to become DAM professionals?
That's a really good question, and I have to say, from a personal experience, I never aspired to become a digital asset management professional. So really, these two questions here are they one leads into another in a sense that I got into this industry maybe 20 years ago, totally by accident. I started as a graphic designer and then realized that I really didn't have the talent to be a very good graphic designer. And I also realized it's difficult to make a very good living as a graphic designer. But more than anything, I noticed that I was way more into the background, the functioning of the applications. I was in desktop publishing, and I used to use PageMaker and Quark and then InDesign. And I found that I really liked the technical aspect of it more than the artistic side of it. So even though I was an art director for a little while at the Wall Street Journal, and even though I did that and I designed pages and special sections, and I found that I was much better using an artistic eye than I was creating the art myself. And that really transferred into digital asset management, working on these large workflow systems and getting a little bit more into how these systems actually connect and make things happen. So becoming a digital asset management professional, I would say that my biggest advice would be to get some experience in how these systems are used. It's difficult to step right into a digital asset management project and have expertise because the large ones may only happen a few times throughout your professional career. Rather, it may be better to gain some experience as a user, what we say is on the business side, and not focus as much on the technical side. If you do that, then you get a much better understanding of your users, and you're able to transition that into the setup, the configuration, and get an understanding of really what the workflow needs. You also, I think if you do that, it comes across in your language as you are addressing your user community and addressing their concerns when you're trying to roll out these big systems, and you tend to get an increased buy-in when that happens. But the final thing that I would really say, as far as people aspiring to become a digital asset management professional, is that, as I look back, I see that everything drove to really me being in this profession. But when I was making those decisions to go from role to role, it was never with I want to be a digital asset management person and professional as the end game. Rather, it was accepting challenges along the career path that kind of broadened my experience. And that's probably the best advice that I can give, is to not turn down opportunities on projects or even new jobs just because they don't fit tightly within a little box. Use your experience and then grow.
Great advice. Well, thanks, Bryan.
Anytime. I love talking about digital asset management. I think this is really a piece of technology that people don't realize how much it has to do with what they see on their phones or televisions or anything. And as we become so digital in our lives, in our daily lives, being able to manage digital assets and manage that data and really respond to marketing needs and trends is even more critical now than it was 20 years ago when we were print, TV, radio, and that was about it. The flexibility that the web has given us has made our profession just as important as a software engineer or any one of those program creators, because we have the ability to really see the entire horizon when it comes to these things that we're driving out to our customers.
For more on this and other digital asset management topics, go to anotherDAMblog.com. For this and 170 other podcast episodes, go to anotherDAMpodcast.com. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to email anotherDAMblog@gmail.com. Thanks again.